You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. Now joined by the #1 play-by-play commentator in all of college athletics, the great Brian Jeffries. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Mike. I think your superlatives are a bit overblown, but thank you for having me on. It's always great to talk to you.
All right. Now, I got to admit that I did feel a little bit bad. I was complaining. It was a first world problem last week where I was complaining about the 9 o'clock tips, and we got a 9 o'clock tip this week. But you made a great point there, Brian, where you said, there's some other people this works a little bit better for.
Yeah, the international players, the European guys in particular. The time difference, of course, means that game is going to tip off very early in the morning as opposed to the middle of the night, which most of the games do when we tip here at 6 or 7 or even 8. It's well before sunrise in Europe, so it's a great opportunity for them to get a chance to not lose as much sleep and see their family, their sons and friends play basketball. So that's the plus side. I know for the rest of us, it makes it a late night, but that's what it's all about this time of the year. You don't have any control over it, so you play it when they tell you to play it.
All right. Speaking of which, Brian, you've been doing this for quite a while, and the McHale crowd. Arizona's coming off a kind of a rough stretch right there against the Washington schools up in Oregon, obviously a tough game. And then Arizona comes back to USC and UCLA at home. And I'll tell you what, UCLA, that game reminds you just what a home court advantage having McHale is. And it just kind of felt throughout the game that, yes, the players have to play, but it didn't feel like the crowd was going to really let them lose that game.
Well, and it's been that way for well over 30 years, as you know, Mike. Arizona's led the Pac-12 attendance and will again this year because it's the greatest fan base in the league and one of the best in the country. And they know when their team needs help. And, they were out in force. And the same thing for USC, back-to-back sellouts now. And I think that's what it's all about. And the players feed off that. There's no question about it. And in particular, against UCLA, it helped their defense. And, the guys played with a lot of energy. That's what Tommy Lloyd really likes to see. And I think the defense is getting better. But, yeah, you give the crowd plenty of credit because they understand they are needed. And it's also one of the great rivalries in college basketball, Mike. And I think that be it here or Pauley Pavilion, the fans are always going to be out in force because it's a special day.
It always strikes me, too, is just amazing that a guy like Tommy Lloyd, he loses Ben Mather and he loses Christian Coloco, Dalen Terry. And I'll be honest with you, I had a lot of questions about the team coming in. I thought they'd be good. But, Brian, this is a heck of a follow-up for his National Coach of the Year awards right there. You got the 6th-ranked team in the country. You lose 3 essential first-round picks, and you replace them, with some transfer portal guys, a couple new players. But this program is not stopping right here, and I think this is the ultimate sign of that.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, two things, Mike. Number one is the head coach, Tommy Lloyd, and his staff, who've done a tremendous job teaching and bringing these guys along. And number two, it's the system. And guys love to play the system that Tommy Lloyd teaches. And
Correct.
When you have players that love what they're doing, and then you've got outstanding coach, outstanding staff that know how to teach it, it's a great formula to have. And so there's no reason to think that it's just not going to continue because, as Tommy brings in more players and, the program changes over, it's the system and the coaching that really, are at the forefront. And so I think that has a lot to do with their success right now. The improvement from the guys that were here a year ago, and also the guys you mentioned they brought in. You bring in 4 freshmen and a couple of transfers, and how quickly can they kind of meld into this? And they've done a nice job. 2 of the freshmen have played significant roles. Both of the transfers have played huge roles, and with that, they're sitting at 17-3.
All right, Brian, I'm going to ask you about a nickname that I came up with right here. I'm very curious what you have to say, but the official brew of PHNX is 4 Peaks. So what I've thought about for the longest time is you got the 4 U of A big men. Call them the 4 Peaks. Now, granted, there's only 2 that are playing a ton right now, but you can check it out at Tempe, or you can check out at the Tap and Bottle locations, which we drink as well. Check it out, 4 Peaks. What do you think about that nickname, Brian? Does it have any staying power?
Well, Mike, the way things are going right now in college basketball, I'm certain that they'll be selling advertising on their uniforms sometime very soon. So I think you've got, a great idea there. I can see, the wheels spinning. You're looking at, how much commission can I get off of this? I get it. I understand. So, hey, yeah, go for it.
Right, for sure. Okay, now looking at this team and the adjustments that were made, Tommy Lloyd, to me, did something really interesting in the second half there, where Azuolas struggled in the first half, been a rare occurrence for him this season. And then in the second half, he got into a lot of pick and roll action, and UCLA really didn't have an answer for that. And that, to me, is what great coaches are made of. What you make those adjustments at the half. And Tommy Lloyd has shown time and again that he's a cool customer, but he also knows what he's doing out there.
Well, I guess my only reaction to that would be, who has an answer for Azuolas Tubelis? Because not many teams really have this year. I think the only time you could say, if you even, I can't even use the word bad game. If he's had a quote unquote off game, I think it's been more because he just has missed shots, and that happens in basketball, rather than teams taking anything away from him. And the thing with Arizona is, when you've got 2 outstanding big men like that with Azuolas and Oumar Ballo, you can try and defend one of them, but it's very difficult to defend both of them. I will say this, Oregon probably did as good a job as anybody in trying to limit those 2 guys. And guess what? They had the size that they were able to do it. And that's, the big question for opposing teams is, do you have enough size to defend both guys? And I'll jump ahead to this Wednesday when Arizona plays Washington State. I mean, Zoo had a great game against them despite the loss here in Tucson. Can they, close him down and Oumar in the same game? I haven't seen it, happen except maybe one time this year. And it's going to be a tough matchup for anybody down the road, in particular in Pac-12 play.
In my lifetime, I've never really seen something where Arizona's got 2 guys that you come in. There's been a lot of times when Arizona's had really good post players. Obviously, you've covered them. But it seems like it's very rare territory to have 2 guys that can essentially combine for 35 points and 20 rebounds, generally when you go into a game. And, Brian, to me, that's a great starting point that, Arizona's been very blessed over the years, but you don't see that a lot at Arizona or in college basketball.
Well, and I think the other key thing is they're both big guys, but they are not identical big guys. And so you can have 2 really good centers or 2 really good power forwards, but they're distinctly different in the way they play the game. And I think that's, again, the real key for the Wildcats. When you go 6'11", 7 feet there in the middle, and even Oumar, he has got a nice little face-up jumper that he hits on occasion, but Azuolas Tubelis has he's got everything good, but, he's got such quick feet. He's able to turn on defenders and I think freeze them. He's got an excellent jumper, but he can play with his back to the basket. And so I just love the idea that those 2 guys are different in the way they go about things. And I think, again, that's been one of the key to having 2 big men that people have a very difficult time matching up against because of the way you have to try and defend them, and they're different in the way you have to defend them.
All right, you might say to yourself, you know what, I'd like to go and watch a game, but I don't know where to go to. Let me tell you about this, Brian. Tap and Bottle, the Tap and Bottle watch parties for PHNX downtown. The great Brody Dryden has shown up multiple times with his lovely girlfriend as well. Always good to catch up with Brody. So again, check it out. Come down and join us. 4 Peaks is down there as well, as is Mountain Mike's Pizza, a new sponsor. Do you like pizza, Brian?
I can do pizza, yes.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. All right. Check it out, though. That location on Oracle and Wetmore, Mountain Mike's Pizza and Tap and Bottle. Love having both of them on board. All right. Now, looking ahead, Brian, so you've got the Washington trip coming up. And I remember, especially like in the 90s where Washington State was always a gimme because I think ran off something like 40 straight or whatever it felt like. But this is a little bit different because both these teams played Arizona very tough at home. I would imagine you're going to get a pretty motivated Arizona team here.
Well, you would think so. I mean, coming off two really good home wins, playing their best defense in back-to-back games in two games so far this past weekend, and knowing that, they're still 2 games out of first place, and the goal is to win the conference championship, as they did last year. In order to do so, you've got to think about winning out, and that means winning every game, and you do take them one game at a time, and Washington State's up next. And so, yeah, I think the Wildcats will be ready to play. I don't think there's any question about that. They know that they're going to have to bring their A game to Pullman because when the Wildcats go on the road, they always get the A game from the other team. And Washington State, they're reeling with confidence right now. They came off a rough road trip, but they are very good at home. They're 2 home losses in conference play have been by a total of 3 points.
3 points.
If memory serves me right. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the conference. They shoot about 40% at home. And so, you know what the Wildcats have got to do on Thursday night? It's not going to be easy. Mohamed Gay had his way with the Wildcats at McHale Center. Arizona's got to find an answer there. DJ Rodman, they've got some weapons. There's no doubt about that. And so, I'm looking forward to seeing how Arizona comes out of the gate. I think that you're going to know early on in that game, kind of the way the game in Tucson. I mean, Washington State came out and you could see they were ready to play, and they were up by 10 at halftime, and the Wildcats just really never recovered. And so can Arizona turn the tables now? Can they come out and establish something very early against Washington State and let them know that, they're there to win the game? And I think the Wildcats have better talent. I think they're in a better place right now in terms of where their season is. And with, Tommy Lloyd switching up the lineup last week, I think that's paid big dividends. It strengthened the bench. So Arizona can go and win that game. They just need to go win the game.
You mentioned Pelle Larsson coming off the bench, and it's always interesting to me because some guys can just come off the bench. Some guys are good in either way. I mean, you covered Jason Terry. It didn't matter if he was coming off the bench or if he was starting, you were going to get that JT. Some guy, you can just tell, though, Pelle Larsson just looks, when he came into the game, and again, maybe it's just me from the media seat, but it just looked like he was comfortable. Like, I'm coming in, I'm playing my game. Maybe you don't have the pressure, but it certainly looks like a different Pelle coming off the bench.
Well, keep in mind what his role was last year. I mean,
Right.
He was the guy off the bench last year. And so they're reprising what he did a year ago. And I'll give him all the credit in the world. I'm sure that conversation when Tommy sat down with him a week ago and said, hey, we'd like to do this. And Pelle's all in on it because everybody on this team wants to win. And he understands that if he's stronger in that role, then he's going to take it. And he has certainly taken it, I think, in stride. Looked very good offensively against USC. I think he is one of the best defenders on the team. And what the Wildcats did, it wasn't just Pelle, but Courtney Ramey, Cedric Henderson, what they did defensively against Jaime Jaquez on Saturday, I think was maybe the biggest key to the game. And so Pelle is a big part of that. And again, he wants to win just like this entire team does. And if it means coming off the bench, he will. And some guys are like that. Like you said, I mean, I've talked to many players before that tell me that if they can sit on the bench for 3 or 4 minutes to start the game and they get to, they're like a coach on the bench. Right. Then they get a scouting report on the team they're playing, a live scouting report, and it just gives them a better idea what they need to do when they get on the floor. So I think it was an excellent move. It doesn't mean that it's ingrained for the rest of the season. You never know, but at least the early indications are very positive.
Kylan Boswell's been a nice little addition to this team. Like he's kind of the Pelle Larsson course that he's coming off a foot injury to start the season, starts getting into shape throughout. But you can tell at 17, and Tommy Lloyd is not he's not a BSer. He said, I think that this can be one of the better guards to come through here. And you're starting to see some of that right now. I mean, for being 17, he doesn't play like he's 17, and he certainly doesn't appear like he's 17, Brian.
Well, he's been my favorite guy just in terms of where he's come from day one to now, and knowing that he sat for 4 months and didn't play basketball, which is, extremely difficult. And they brought him along slowly, I think, as everybody knows. And but at the same time, you could see that talent. And if you look at his assist to turnover ratio here in particular, the last 3 weeks or so, I mean, it's been almost off the charts. It's almost Steve Kerr like assist to turnover ratio. Tommy wants him to shoot more. Don't be shy. He's a very good shooter. Tommy told me last week that when they scouted him in high school, he says he thought he was a great shooter. And so I think that part is certainly, it's emerging. But as he gains more confidence, I think with his shot, he's going to be something else down the road. And he's been a great addition so far. And, right now you look at this team and you say, everybody's very important. There's
Right.
no player that is more important than the other. And he's just another piece of the puzzle right now that's making this team go.
All right. Let's say for a second that if you're a U of A fan and you want to go watch the U of A, but you don't know where to go get the tickets for it's after hours, Game Time. Here's the deal. You can get onto Game Time, the #1 ticketing app, and get tickets at 60% off many times. Concerts, tickets, you name it. Brian's a big concert guy as well, as we've talked about before. When is the last concert you've been to, Brian?
Last concert I've been to, a group you may not know of. They're called Switchfoot.
I've heard
out
of
of San
Switchfoot.
Diego.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say Southern California, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw them here in Tucson, saw them in Vegas. I think that was the most recent one. Yes.
All right. Well, that's where Game Time could help you out right there. Many times tickets 60% off. Check out the show notes and the link in the description. Game Time right there. All right, Brian, I wanted to switch over to football for a few minutes with Jedd Fisch. Obviously, some really nice recruiting news coming down. But when Fisch was hired, he said all the right things. And, but I've also heard that before from other coaches, nobody's going to outwork us. Nobody's going to out recruit us. We're going to prioritize kids in the city. This is the first coach in quite a while that has followed through on all of that. I mean, you watch it, I have to interview recruits every single day. And they always say, man, he said, this coaching staff is nonstop. They send Christmas cards to, my parents, birthday cards, you name it. He said and when we commit, they're even more on it. And it's just very impressive. And people ask me all the time, how is he getting these players? It's because he's working hard and he's putting in the effort to be able to sell the product he's putting out there, Brian.
Well, Jedd has, incredible energy. We saw that when he arrived here. He hired an outstanding staff. They all believe in his philosophy of working hard and playing hard. Their background speaks for itself. And they also knew coming in that they had a lot of hard work to do. This program was not in good shape, and the cupboard was not quite bare, but you could see the back of it. And so you knew that they had to work hard. We didn't know at the time exactly how they would go about it. That first year, really, and into their second year, they really concentrated on offense. And now you see what they're doing defensively in terms of their recruiting, not only freshman-wise, but the transfer portal, et cetera. And that was Jedd's plan. And he made that very clear that we wanted to build the offense first. We did that. Now we're going to build the defense. And so things are coming together. They've still got a ways to go. But I tell you what, they're headed in the right direction, and they're headed there fast. And I think the biggest compliment I hear about the program is what I hear from other schools. Right. And they're scared because they see the Wildcats coming. And when you are in that building process, sometimes if you're just a casual fan, you don't have the patience. And the coaches have to be patient. They have to recruit the correct people. And just like this past season, that even though the defensive numbers weren't all that good, there was a patience factor knowing, okay, we know what direction we're going. We know what we're going to do next. And it probably wasn't easy at times for those guys. But they got through it, and now they're making the strides defensively. So, like I said, when other schools are afraid of what Jedd Fisch is building, that tells you he's doing it right. And is it going to come this next season? I mean, they'll be a better team. I don't think there's any question about that. The only question is how much better. They probably exceeded expectations this last year, and no one would have. Who had them? What was the Vegas line on their win total list before the season started? Mike, was like 3.5, something like that.
Brian, I'm glad you asked, and that's why you're the GOAT, because I can tell you that leads me right into a read. The DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word
Okay.
PHNX. Here's the deal. Brian brought up the line. The line was 2.5. I told
Okay.
everybody out there, I said, listen, this team's going to win more than that. And hop in there, code word PHNX, 21 and up, Arizona only. You've got a gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. But Brian, same here. I thought that, 2.5 seemed low to me, especially with some of the talent that he brought in. And next year, I think it's going to be, a little bit of the same, where maybe some of the national sorts are a little bit behind the curve. But just look back this past year. You bring in the Pac-12 freshman of the year at quarterback. Then you have one of the handful of best receiving units in the entire conference. Jacob Cowing, as you know, could have played anywhere. T-Mac could have played anywhere. But it's also an interesting combination, though, of guys that he finds under the radar. A Tanner McLaughlin. I for sure, I didn't see Tanner McLaughlin becoming one of the better tight ends in the conference. Or, a Jonas Savaiinaea, a Wendell Moe, just kind of these under the radar guys. And that's a real talent right there. Something that, Dick Tomey was obviously very good at as well.
Well, you have to be able to recognize talent, and I think that's what makes a good coach. And you can say that about any coach in the country in any sport, is that you have to be able to evaluate correctly. Also, you have to be able to evaluate what fits your system. And so Tanner McLaughlin's a great example, Mike. Talking to him last year, and I'll try and make it short, but grew up in Canada. Mm-hmm. And said that his team, his equivalent of his high school team, would come to the States every year. And they went to Pullman and saw Washington State play Arizona.
Right.
And he knew right then he wanted to play for Arizona. This was a couple of years ago, of course. And, lo and behold, Jedd Fisch gets a call, gets some tape, sees the guy, says, I think this is the right guy. And, the rest of the story is history, as they say. And so that's just a great example of evaluating talent. It also helps that you got a guy that, loved the idea of playing for you. And,
right.
And Tanner's certainly there. And so he fits that mold. And that's just a small example of where they are right now and how they've been able to get things rolling offensively this quickly.
Yep. Your partner, Lamont Lovett, I think, made a great point to me, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of school here. I message Lamont all day, basically every day now. Cool dude. And he said, Jedd Fisch will listen to any alumni that have something to say. If they say, hey, there's this kid over here you might want to look at. There's a kid over here that you want to look at. And he says, it's not like he just checks it down and then he goes and he actually looks at it. And that's something, too, that's also unique. I've talked with quite a few alums that have said the same thing, that Jedd Fisch, while he's got these things rolling, is not above listening to somebody out there that said, hey, you might want to be able to check some of these kids or check a guy out here. And that's essentially, some of the players on this team have been alumni referred players that Fisch looked at and said, yeah, he can be a good Wildcat.
Well, I mean, that's one thing Jedd did immediately upon arrival, and that's touch base with the former players, something the previous staff had ignored. And right. Jedd and his staff said, you've got to be part of this family. And as Lamont has told you, I mean, they hold regular Zoom calls with any alumni that want to be there and Jedd's very open about what they're doing and where they're going and what help they need. And all those guys bleed Cardinal and Navy. They love the fact that they're part of it. They want to see the team and the program grow. And so they're going to do exactly what you said, Mike. I mean, they're better evaluators than a lot of people because, they might be on scene. They see a guy, they might have a son playing football and they go see a game and they see some other players that might fit the Arizona mold. And there you go. You never know. But the fact, as you said, that Jedd and his staff will take the time to check out anybody that's sent their way, it tells you why they are good at evaluating talent.
All right, got one more question for Brian here, but first, more furniture, MOR furniture. Brian Jeffries is a tall guy. Brody Dryden is a tall guy. I am not a tall guy. But you know what? More Furniture has all kinds of stuff for all of us across the board. morfurniture.com. Check it out. They redid the entire studios. Looks fantastic. Check it out. All shapes and sizes. Great deals. MOR Furniture. Check out the show notes and link in the description. Brian, the thing that, and Dave Hickey mentioned this to me quite a while ago. He said, I want to have coaches, men and women who want to be here. That's a big part of it. And I look across the board right now. Tommy Lloyd. You see the passion of Jedd Fisch we just talked about. Then you look at a Caitlin Lowe, a Chip Hale. These are coaches that whether they win or they succeed, you know that they're going to put everything into it because of how much this means to them. They're not just collecting a check. And to me, that's something that can be kind of understated in college athletics.
Well, I mean, you got outstanding leadership, and of course, I'm biased. I'm around these people all the time. It's a great university to begin with. I think the athletic department is exceptionally strong right now, and getting stronger. You got a great community that you live in. We'll throw in the weather. I mean, that's always something
Right.
that helps. But making those decisions, and you don't always hit a home run when you hire.
Right.
Sometimes you don't know. But I think Dave has done an excellent job of evaluating the hiring and looking for people that are, like you said, Mike, the people that want to be here, that, this is not a paycheck. This is not a ladder, a stepping stone to another job. It doesn't mean that they're not going to leave. It just means that, they know that they have an opportunity. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Do you have an opportunity to win here?
Right.
And so if you're a prospective coach and you're looking at Arizona and they're talking to you about a job, can I win at the University of Arizona? And the answer is almost across the board, yes. And another great example, Dave Rubio just retires.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rita Stubbs, longtime assistant, former player, longtime Tucsonan now.
Right.
It was almost a no-brainer to bring her now in as the head coach because Dave had been grooming her for that position.
Right.
And because of her background, I mean, it was just the perfect choice. Now, will she ultimately succeed? I think so. Yeah, you never know. But the fact is that she's all in on, staying here and building the program to the heights as high as you can get it. And that's what you want to see out of coaches. And so sometimes schools will go after that big name. It always puzzles me when I hear that when a school's looking for a new coach, no matter what sport it is. Oh, fancy, we've got to have a big name coach.
Right.
Well, that doesn't always equal wins.
For sure.
And so you've got to find the right coach, for the right situation. And, keep in mind, and we've talked about this before, Dave, you go back a couple of years and think of where Arizona was, in particular in its marquee programs in basketball and football. And then you get the two hires that you spoke of and the other hires, Clancy Shields, et cetera. I mean, people that have come in and put their mark on the program and put Arizona in that upward rise. I mean, you can't say enough about finding the right people.
Right. And, Dave makes this point, and he's made this point to me multiple times. He said, listen, man, he says, I'm far from perfect. He said, but the thing is, if you mess up on something, you got to be able to learn and try to correct from it. And he said, that's what we liked about bringing in Jedd, is that, first of all, we knew he would do all the stuff off the field that we needed to engage the fan base. He was going to recruit, he was going to try, and he was going to handle the program in a manner we saw fit. And again, not every hire is great, but it also takes a unique administration to be able to look at that and say, okay, we're going to learn from this and then move over here. And, that's what they did.
Well, in the two cases in particular you talk about, and not to mention, what Adia Barnes has done in women's basketball. I mean, I could go on and on. Right. About the hires that have been made here, both recently and earlier than that. It's just a real key. And you always learn from your mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But I think that as long as I go back to that, the big name thing, as long as you don't get caught up in finding somebody that, either their resume or what they've done at other places, etc. You still got to look at the quality of the person, and I think that's when you sit down with somebody, you learn a lot about them, and that's why, like, Jedd Fisch is a great example. I mean, nobody, he was not on anybody's radar in terms of being a head coach, specifically at the University of Arizona, but when they sat down with him, it didn't take long to learn his passion and his energy and his willingness to say, okay, I know there's all work to do and here's how I'm going to do it. And, he started out that way.
All right. He's Brian Jeffries, the voice of the Wildcats. Brian, I will never complain about a start time again because you put that in very good perspective for me right there.
Very good, Mike. Well, be it 9 o'clock or 12 noon, then
just depends on where you are.
Yeah.
All right. He's Brian Jeffries. I'm Mike Luke. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.